my sister's engagement, Mom announced. She deserves everything for this night. Everyone cheered. Then the planner handed me the $12,000 invoice. I smiled, pulled out my phone, and their cheers stopped cold. The chandelier lights blazed across the ballroom. Champagne glasses clinked, and laughter thundered around me. My mother's voice cut through the noise like a whip. "Tonight belongs to Alyssa," she declared, gripping my sister's hand and raising it high. "She deserves everything for this night." The crowd erupted in cheers. Alyssa, in her diamond-studded gown, tilted her head back, basking in the attention. Her fiancé, Evan, stood beside her, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. I forced a smile, though my stomach churned. Then, like a perfectly timed punchline, the wedding planner, a man in a crisp navy suit, strode toward me, slipping a thick envelope into my hand. "This is the final invoice, Miss Collins," he said smoothly. $12,482 is due tonight." I blinked at the paper, the bold numbers glaring back like a slap to the face. My name, my responsibility. I looked up. My mom was still holding Alyssa's hand, pretending not to notice, pretending this was perfectly normal. Everyone around me kept cheering, clinking their glasses as if they hadn't just shoved the entire financial burden onto me like I was some invisible servant. I felt the heat rise in my chest, my pulse hammering in my ears. My lips curled into a smile, not the fake one they expected, but the sharp, dangerous kind that made a few people pause. I slid the invoice into my clutch, pulled out my phone, and stood. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice slicing through the noise. The chatter died. Dozens of faces turned toward me, still glowing with laughter, now edged with confusion. "Seems like I have a little surprise, too." Alyssa's smirk faltered. My mother's glass froze halfway to her lips. I tapped the screen loud enough for the microphone nearby to pick up the sound. "You've been celebrating on my dime, but I'm not paying this bill." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alyssa snapped. "What are you talking about? You can't just—" "Oh, I can," I interrupted, my tone calm, but inside feeling like a live wire ready to snap. "See," the planner handed me the invoice. "In my name, $12,482, money none of you even asked if I had. You cheered while you shoved the weight on me." The room shifted, cheers gone, silence dripping heavy. My mother's face reddened, her voice trembling with fury. "You will not ruin this night, Emily." "Ruin it?" I let out a sharp laugh. "No, I'm just pulling back the curtain. You all wanted a show. Well, here it is." The energy in the room was no longer celebration. It was tension so sharp you could hear breaths catch. People exchanged nervous glances. The music faltered. Alyssa's hand slipped from Evan's, her perfect posture cracking. And I, standing in the middle of their carefully staged fairy tale, felt the first taste of control I'd been denied my whole life. And I wasn't stopping here. For a second, no one moved. The entire ballroom, dripping in gold lacquer and polished marble, froze like a photograph. Then Alyssa found her voice, her tone dripping with indignation. "Emily, stop being dramatic," she snapped, tugging at Evan's sleeve. "This is my night. You're not going to ruin it just because you're jealous." The word jealous landed like poison. People muttered. A few raised eyebrows, whispering, "Jealous of what?" I turned slowly, scanning the crowd. "Jealous," I repeated, my laugh bitter and sharp. "Of a sister who can't even pay for her own party. Of a mother who hands me a $12,000 debt like it's a party favor. No, Alyssa, I'm not jealous. I'm done." My mother, Margaret, stormed toward me, heels clicking like gunfire on the polished floor, her lips pressed into a thin line, the same look she used when I was a child and dared to talk back. "Put that phone away. You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Mom," I said, my voice carrying louder than hers. "I'm embarrassing you. Everyone here needs to know what kind of family I grew up in. You cheer for Alyssa, you worship her. But when the bill comes, suddenly I'm the wallet, always me." A ripple of discomfort spread. Guests exchanged awkward looks, some adjusting their ties, others lowering their champagne flutes. Evan cleared his throat, trying to rescue the moment. "This isn't the time, Emily. If you have an issue, handle it privately. You're ruining the celebration." I fixed my gaze on him, my tone icy. "Funny, you're about to marry into this family and you don't even see the truth. Or maybe you do, and you're okay with it as long as the show goes on." Evan's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Alyssa's perfect smile had cracked, her hands trembling as she tried to hold her champagne glass. Daniel, the planner, shifted uncomfortably at the edge of the crowd. Miss Collins, he murmured. If you'd prefer, we can. No, I cut him off. Let them hear it. I tapped my phone again, opening my banking app. The balance glowed on the screen, and I turned it toward the nearest table. See this. Less than $300. That's what's in my account. And yet, my mother and sister expected me to cover this. I held up the invoice while they popped bottles and clapped like royalty. The silence shattered into gasps and sharp whispers. $300, someone muttered. Why would they put that on her? Another whispered. Margaret's face turned scarlet, her voice rising like a siren. You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you. Done for me? I shot back, my voice breaking with raw fury. Name one thing, Mom, just one, because all I remember is being the backup plan, the one who takes the blame, the one who foots the bill, the one who never matters unless it's convenient. Alyssa threw her glass down, the shatter echoing through the hall. Enough, this night is about me, Emily, always about me. You're nothing but a bitter shadow. I stepped forward, close enough that her perfume burned in my nose. My voice dropped to a cold whisper that carried across the room. Not anymore. The crowd leaned in, caught between horror and fascination. The tension was electric, pulsing through every chandelier crystal. I turned to the planner and with a calmness that shocked even me said, Send the bill to Margaret or Alyssa. I won't pay a cent. And if you try to put this on my credit, I'll have my lawyer handle it. Margaret hissed, You don't have a lawyer. I smiled, sharp. You'd be surprised what I've been preparing. I slid my phone back into my clutch, turned and walked toward the exit. Each step echoed like a drumbeat. No one stopped me. No one dared. Even the DJ stood frozen, one hand hovering over the music controls. At the door I paused, looking back one last time. Alyssa stood pale, her perfect night unraveling before her. Margaret looked like she'd swallowed glass, fury boiling but powerless to stop me. I lifted my chin. You wanted to cheer for Alyssa? Go ahead, but remember this moment. Remember who actually pulled the rug out from under your little fantasy. Then, I pushed the doors open and stepped into the cool night air, the muffled chaos of the ballroom fading behind me. For the first time in years, I felt something powerful, not anger, not fear, but control. And I knew this was only the beginning. The morning after, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, Margaret, Alyssa, even Evan. The night I'd walked out of that ballroom, I'd left them scrambling. Their perfect fairy tale shattered under the glittering lights. But now they were desperate. The voicemail from my mother played in my kitchen as I sipped black coffee, the bitterness matching the fire in my chest. Emily, you've humiliated this family enough. Come over immediately. We need to talk about the damage you've caused. I laughed under my breath. Damage I caused. The next message was Alyssa, her voice shrill and panicked. You owe me, Emily. Do you know how many people left early? Evan's parents are furious. They think we're unstable now. Fix it. You can't just abandon your responsibility. My responsibility. Always those words, always that weight. I set my phone down and glanced at the neat folder sitting on my counter, the one I'd pulled together quietly for months. Bank statements, old messages, receipts, proof of every time they'd leaned on me, drained me, used me like I was nothing more than their personal bank account. The phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Evan. If you don't pay the invoice, my father's lawyers will make sure your credit is destroyed. You'll regret this. I felt a smile creep across my face. He thought I was weak, that I'd cower, but he didn't know what I held in my hands. By noon, I was standing outside Margaret's house, the same white-columned suburban monument where I'd grown up invisible. The driveway was jammed with cars. They'd all gathered like vultures. When I walked in, the chatter silenced. Alyssa sat on the couch, her makeup smeared from crying. Evan stood stiff beside her, his arms crossed, while Margaret paced the room like a general before battle. You've embarrassed us enough, Margaret snapped, not even greeting me. You will apologize to your sister and agree to pay half the invoice. We can work out installments, but you will fix this. I looked around at their faces, expectant, smug, certain I'd fold. Then I placed the folder on the coffee table and slid it open. Half the invoice, I said coolly. No, I'm not paying a cent, and if you push me, I'll make sure every single person in this town knows what kind of fraud you've been running. Margaret's eyes narrowed. What nonsense are you talking about? I pulled out the first sheet, an invoice for a previous event, one Alyssa had charged to me under my name. Then another bank transfers where I'd covered utilities, emergency credit card payments, all things they'd promised to repay but never did. I tossed them onto the table, page after page, until Alyssa's tears froze and Evan's smirk cracked. For years, I said, my voice rising with every word, you've bled me dry and I've kept every receipt. Do you know how easy it would be to show these to Evan's parents? To the people at your fancy country club, Mom? The color drained from Margaret's face. Alyssa stammered, You wouldn't dare. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a blade-sharp whisper. Try me. The silence was suffocating. You could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. Evan finally snapped, stepping toward me. You're bluffing, you don't have the guts. I cut him off with a single sheet of paper held up like a weapon. Recognize this. The $5,000 charge for Alyssa's engagement dress. It's in my name. Care to explain that to your parents, Evan? Care to explain how your fiancée and her mother financially exploited her sister just to keep up appearances? His mouth opened, then shut. For the first time, Evan looked less like a smug fiancé and more like a man realizing the floor was crumbling beneath him. Alyssa broke down, sobbing. Why are you doing this, Emily? You're supposed to love me. I'm your sister. I stared at her, my throat tightening, but my voice steady. Sisters don't destroy each other. Sisters don't bury the other in debt so they can play princess. You stopped being my sister the moment you decided my future was less important than your spotlight. Margaret lunged forward, grabbing the folder, but I yanked it back. Touch this again and I'll make sure every last document ends up online. The room erupted, Alyssa crying, Evan cursing, Margaret shouting threats. But I didn't flinch. I stood taller, stronger than I ever had in this house. You think you still own me? I said, my voice shaking the air. Not anymore. You've had your turn, now it's mine. And with that, I tucked the folder under my arm, turned, and walked out, their chaos trailing behind me like smoke. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. 2 days later, the Collins family tried to erase the scandal. Margaret spun excuses to relatives. Alyssa plastered fake smiles on Instagram. Evan's parents were fed half-truths about a misunderstanding. But whispers traveled faster than lies. Everyone knew something had gone wrong at the engagement, and curiosity was simmering. So when Alyssa and Evan hosted a brunch to smooth things over, the entire social circle showed up, hungry for gossip, eager to see if the fairy tale couple was still shining. I hadn't been invited. Of course not. But that didn't stop me. I walked into the country club, heels clicking against the marble, clutch under my arm. Conversations froze. Eyes darted toward me. Alyssa's smile snapped like glass when she saw me step through the door. Emily, Margaret hissed, striding over in her pastel suit. You were not invited. I know, I said, my tone calm, almost casual. But you should have known I'd show up. After all, you've built half this facade on my back. Might as well let me see how it looks before it all crumbles. A low murmur rippled across the room. Evan's parents turned, brows furrowed. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I walked straight to the microphone stand at the edge of the room, the one reserved for Alyssa's little speech about moving forward. I tapped it twice, the sound echoing sharp across the hushed crowd. Good morning, I began, my voice strong and steady. I wasn't supposed to be here, but I think the truth deserves its own seat at this table. Alyssa shot up, panic flashing across her face. Stop this, Emily. You're obsessed with ruining me. Ruining you? I cut in, my voice rising. No, Alyssa, you've done that yourself. I pulled the folder from my clutch, flipping it open for all to see. For years, this family has used me as their personal ATM. Every bill, every expense they didn't want to handle, they shoved onto me. At your engagement, they handed me a $12,482 invoice like I was the sponsor of your perfect life. Gasps scattered through the room. Evan's parents leaned forward, their expressions hardening. Margaret barked, These are lies, she's jealous. Lies, I snapped, pulling out the dress invoice. This $5,000 gown, paid under my name. Utilities, credit cards, vacations all shoved onto me while they smiled and called me family. I turned toward Alyssa, who was trembling now, her lips quivering. And when I refused to bow down this time, you called me jealous. A shadow, a burden. But tell me, Alyssa, who's the burden now? The sister who stood alone with $300 in her account, or the one who needs someone else to pay for her fairy tale wedding? Silence. Utter, suffocating silence. Evan's father stood slowly, his voice calm but razor-sharp. Is this true? He asked, his gaze locked on Alyssa and Margaret. Margaret stammered, "It's taken out of context. She's twisting," but Evan's mother was already rising from her seat, her face cold. "We don't tolerate deception in this family. If you've built this engagement on fraud, then maybe we need to reconsider." "No," Alyssa wailed, clutching Evan's arm. "It's not like that, I swear." But Evan pulled away, his expression darkening. "You let me walk into this blind. You let me defend you when you've been bleeding your own sister dry." He shook his head. "Unbelievable." The whispers grew into full-blown murmurs now, judgment filling every corner of the room. Margaret reached for Alyssa's hand, but Alyssa yanked it back, her composure shattering. I let the silence stretch before I spoke again, my voice quiet but laced with steel. "I used to think I was powerless in this family. But standing here now, I realize you gave me all the power because I have the truth, and you have nothing but lies." I closed the folder, slid it back into my clutch, and looked directly at my mother. "You always said Alyssa deserved everything. Well, congratulations. You've given her everything she asked for: attention, applause, and now the fallout." Then I turned, walking toward the exit, my heels slicing through the chaos like a drumbeat of freedom. Behind me, voices erupted: accusations, sobs, Evan's parents demanding explanations. But I didn't look back. As the morning sun spilled across the parking lot, I inhaled deeply, the air sharp and clean. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their burdens. I wasn't the shadow. I was finally free. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was their ending, but it was my beginning.